as in continuation with the last topic of bio-inorganic chemistry, we were discussing about the role of metals in the biological system. Metals have a variety of roles to play, which include structural, regulatory, catalytic, electron transfer, oxygen carrier, storage of oxygen, and as a site for photoredox reactions. When we talk about a bit of recapitulation in the storage of iron and storage of oxygen, oxygen is stored in myoglobin and it is carried by hemoglobin. Both of these proteins, they contain iron. Iron is present in the +2 state or in the form of ferrous in these two protein molecules. So, comes in the role of metal ions. Similarly, if we talk about as a site for photoredox reactions, chlorophyll, as we all know, is a pigment which traps sunlight and facilitates photosynthesis in plants. This chlorophyll contains magnesium ions, again the role of metal ions. Similarly, metal ions have important roles in carrying oxygen. There are certain oxygen carrier molecules which are hemoglobin, hemerythrin and hemocyanin, which all contain iron, and to be specific, hemocyanin contains copper. And metal ions which have a number of electron transfer roles also, which are as like examples of cytochrome and ferredoxins. They have a number of catalytic roles also, where a very specific example is vitamin B12 coenzyme, which contains cobalt, again the role of bio-inorganic chemistry, and it catalyzes a number of reactions in the body. Similarly, when we talk about the role of metals as regulators of osmotic pressure inside the body, or as we say, the blood pressure of the body is regulated by the movement of metal ions like sodium and potassium through the cell membranes, again the role of bio-inorganic. And the structural role, which is a very vital role, which gives a structural framework to our body, whether it be calcium, which is present in the teeth and bones, and also non-metal like phosphorus, which is again present as a constituent of our teeth. Then the metallobiomolecules, which are the molecules in the biosystem, they have a number of functions, and they all include the proteins and the non-protein part. The proteins, which are all the enzymes, as we know, enzymes are biological catalysts which catalyze a number of reactions inside the body, including hydrolysis, oxidation reduction reactions, synthesis reactions, and so on. And there are non-proteins, which include the storage proteins, storage non-proteins and the structural non-proteins, which are again involved in a number of reactions inside the body. And the enzymes, as we have discussed, are involved in oxidation reactions and reduction reactions, or redox reactions in the body are termed as oxidoreductases. Enzymes which are involved in hydrolysis reactions in the body are called hydrolases. Enzymes which are involved in synthesis reactions in the body and also isomerization reactions in the body are called isomerases and synthases. A very important example of this being the vitamin B12 coenzyme containing cobalt, and then apart from this enzymes, there are a number of proteins. As we have discussed, or as we know, the enzymes are playing a catalytic role. Enzymes are catalytic proteins. Similarly, there are proteins which perform a storage and structural role inside the body. Proteins like cytochromes, ferredoxins, azurin and stellacyanin. These are electron carrier enzymes which contain iron and copper. Electron carrier, by the word we mean that they are involved in redox reactions. They carry electrons and they transport electrons and pick up electrons and transport them. Then apart from this, there are other examples of storage and structural proteins which include myoglobin, hemoglobin, hemerythrin, which are examples of oxygen binding enzymes. Hemoglobin is a protein which binds to oxygen from the lungs and transports it to the tissues where it is required. Myoglobin is a protein which stores oxygen in the body, because whatever oxygen is being inhaled or during respiration, oxygen is being transported to the tissues and providing energy for various day-to-day activities. Apart from that, myoglobin is a protein which stores the excess oxygen in the body and can be used for future use. Hemoglobin is a molecule which contains 4 units joined together, and hence 4 oxygen atoms are picked up by hemoglobin at a time. Myoglobin is a molecule which is a single unit and can store a single unit of oxygen at a time. Another example of a storage and a structural protein is hemocyanin, which is present in lower animals like arthropoda and mollusks, which contain copper as the metal ion. Proteins have storage and structural roles to play. Proteins like ferritin, transferrin, ceruloplasmin, these are actually the enzymes which contain iron and copper, and they are involved in the transport and storage of metal ions. Ferritin is a protein which stores iron inside the body. Transferrin is a protein which picks up iron from ferritin. Ferritin is the storage protein. Transferrin picks up iron from ferritin and transfers it to the bone marrow, which contains immature RBCs. These immature RBCs, the red blood cells, they recognize the transferrin molecule, accept the iron from it and develop into mature red blood cells. So, transferrin is a protein which is very important, since it is transferring iron from the place where it is being stored to the place where it is being utilized. Ceruloplasmin is another enzyme or a protein which stores copper in the body. Copper also is very important essential metal ion which is required by the body, and its deficiency of in the biological system can result in a number of diseases. The enzymes like calmodulin, they contain copper and they are involved in signal transductions inside the body. A number of signals are being transported from the site of action, and such signals are being transported by enzymes like or carried by enzymes like calmodulin, and such enzymes contain copper. Apart from the protein metallobiomolecules which we have discussed, there is another part of metallobiomolecules which are the non-protein parts. And metallobiomolecules like siderophores contain iron, and they are involved in the metal transport and structural role. As the diagram shows, this is the structure of siderophores, and siderophores contain iron, and they are involved in the transport of iron, and they also protect the biological system against the attack of pathogens. Apart from siderophores, chlorophyll is another non-protein biomolecule which contains magnesium. This is a non-protein metallobiomolecule which is involved in photoredox reactions in the body of plants, to be specific in plants. This is a structure for chlorophyll. It contains magnesium and it is involved in a number of reactions. It traps the sunlight and helps in photosynthesis for the plants. And again, the role of magnesium coming into being explains the presence of metal ions and the importance of metal ions both in biological systems as well as in plants, which are including all the living systems. Now, as far as the role of metal ions is concerned, metal ions which play important roles in the biological system imply that we all need to have all these metal ions which serve as macronutrients or micronutrients, that is, which are required by the body in large amounts or small amounts. They are needed to be present in the biological system. Metal ions which include sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and their roles which we have discussed in brief. Apart from this, there are a number of non-metals also which play important roles in the biological system, and these include elements like phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, and so on. Phosphorus is very important in the terms that it is present along with calcium as phosphate, and calcium phosphate, which is the main constituent of teeth and bones. Sulfur is present in a number of amino acids which are the building blocks of life, and these elements are apart from the essential elements which make up a biosystem, which include carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Carbon, as we all know, is the most important element, which is the element which is making up, or the non-metal which is responsible for the whole system and whole biological system. Hydrogen, which is present in a constituent of water. Hydrogen, which is a constituent of carbohydrates, again is very essential because it is also a building block. It is basically building up. It is just by block a building is made. Similarly, element by element, the whole biological system is created. Similarly, nitrogen, which is there, is an essential constituent of again amino acids, as well as it is an essential constituent of plants which take up nitrogen, which require nitrogen in the form of nitrates, and this is available to them by the nitrogen cycle. And the most important element without which the life cannot survive is oxygen, which is required by all aerobic forms of life to sustain, to provide energy to the system. Apart from this, there are certain other elements which are termed as micronutrients, as we have already discussed in very brief, and they are required by the body in very small amounts. These include elements like vanadium, chromium. Chromium is an essential element for a number of synthesis reactions. Manganese, again an element which is very important in certain enzymes, present in certain enzymes. Cobalt, which is again a very important constituent, which is the only constituent in vitamin B12 coenzyme. Nickel, copper, again which is an essential element which is present in the enzymes, and zinc, which is present in very number of enzymes like carboxypeptidase, which are involved in the number of synthesis and hydrolysis reactions in the body. Then we have molybdenum, tungsten, fluorine, again which is an important constituent of teeth, and that is why probably we all need to use some amount of fluoride in the toothpaste. Iodine and silicon. Silicon again is a building block. Apart from macronutrients which are required in large quantities in the system, micronutrients which are required by the biological system in small amounts, there are also toxic elements which are present in very trace amounts in the environment, which by any chance enter into the biological system can prove to be highly toxic. These includes elements like lead, these are basically all the heavy elements which include lead, mercury, cadmium. To some extent they poison the system and they result in the inability of enzymes to react. They bind on to the enzymes, they bind on to the protein parts and inhibit their action. Vanadium otherwise is an essential micronutrient in the body, but when it forms its oxygen, when it forms a complex with oxygen in the terms of vanadate, just like phosphate, then it can interfere in certain reactions in the body, and this vanadate ion which can interfere in the movement of ions, that is the transfer of sodium and potassium in and out of the membrane, because phosphate ions are important for the movement of ions, sodium and potassium, in and out of the membrane as ATP, which is providing energy for this whole process to take place. If phosphate is replaced by vanadate, then it poisons the system. For any biological reaction to take place, there are two important requirements, that is the making of a bond and the breaking of a bond. Whenever a biological reaction has to take place, the bond with the metal and the enzyme should form easily, or the site of reaction and the metal should form easily, and the bond between the metal and the site of reaction should be able to break easily. Then only reactions inside the body can be maintained, and this is very unique for biological systems. As in case of vanadate, once it forms a bond with the ATP molecule, it does not dissociate and it does not allow ATP to release energy. Hence, it causes poisoning of the system. So, we conclude from here is that those ions, those metal ions which are otherwise essential for the biosystem, whether in small amounts or whether in large amounts, can also be a result of, can also result in poisoning the system if they are present in some other type of a complex. And bio-inorganic chemistry, which deals with the role of all these metal ions, whether they have a positive role to play or whether in case they form complexes with the other ligands which sometimes become negative, is all related to bio-inorganic chemistry. And Bio-Inorganic Chemistry is an essential topic to be discussed, because we all need to know whatever is present in our system and whatever is required by the biological system to survive. Apart from bio-inorganic chemistry, apart from whatever we have just discussed, we need to know the role of certain ions like sodium and potassium, which is very important for the biological system, in the sense that they are involved in maintaining the osmotic pressure of the body. Sodium and potassium are required by the body in specific amounts, and since they are maintaining the osmotic pressure, or as we say, the blood pressure of the body, and they are required in specific limited amounts, so a person who is a patient who is suffering from high or low blood pressure is advised to intake lesser amount of salt which contains sodium ions. And the role of sodium and potassium is termed in the case of, or the working of these sodium and potassium ions is termed in the case of ion pumps. Since these two ions are pumped outside and inside the cell, they are termed as ion pumps, and the working of these ion pumps is very crucial for the body, since it is a mode of active transport which enables transport of ions in and out of the cell membrane required accordingly. So that is all for today, and we will wind up with our topic. Thank you so much.